Continuing our narration of Swami Sri Yukteswar's The Holy Science. The period of 2,000 to 400 years during which the sun passes through the second 20th portion of its orbit is called Dwapara Yuga. Dharma, the mental virtue, is then in the second stage of development and is but half complete. The human intellect can then comprehend the fine matters or electricities and their attributes, which are the creating principles of the external world. The period of 3,600 years during which the sun passes through the third 20th part of its orbit is called Treta Yuga. Dharma, the mental virtue, is then in the third stage. The human intellect becomes able to comprehend the divine magnetism, the source of all electrical forces on which the creation depends for its existence. The period of 4,800 years, during which the sun passes through the remaining fourth 20th portion of its orbit, is called Satya Yuga. Dharma, the mental virtue, is then in its fourth stage and completes its full development. The human intellect can comprehend all, even God the Spirit beyond this visible world. Manu, the great Rishi, or illumined sage of Satya Yuga, describes these yugas more clearly in the following passage from his Samhita, which translates from Sanskrit to 4,000 of years, they say, is the Krita Yuga, or the Satra Yuga, or the golden age of the world. Its morning twilight has just as many hundreds, that would be 4. 4,000 of years with just as many hundreds in its morning twilight, and its period of evening dusk is of the same length, 400. So that is 400 plus 4,000 plus 400 equals 4,800. And the other 3 ages, with their morning and evening twilights, the thousands and the hundreds decrease by 1. For example, 300 plus 3,000 plus 300 equals 3,600. That fourfold cycle comprising 12,000 years and is called an age of the gods. The sum of 1,000 divine ages constitutes 1 day of Brahma, and of the same length is its night. The period of Satya Yuga is 4,000 years in duration. The 400 years before and after Satya Yuga proper, are its sandhis, or periods of mutation with the preceding and succeeding yugas respectively. Hence, 4,800 years in all is the proper duration of Satya Yuga. In the calculation of the period of other yugas and yuga sandhis, it is laid down that the numeral 1 should be deducted from the numbers of both the thousands and the hundreds, which indicate the periods of the previous yugas and sandhis. From this rule, it appears that 3,000 years is the length of Treta Yuga, and 300 years before and after are its sandhis, the periods of mutation, which make a total of 3,600 years. So, 2,000 years is the age or duration of Dwapara Yuga, with 200 years before and after as its sandhis, a total of 2,400 years. And lastly, 1,000 years is the length of Kali Yuga, with 100 years before and after as its sandhis, a total of 1,200 years. Thus, 12,000 years, the sum total of all periods of these 4 yugas, is the length of one of the Daiva yugas, or electric couple, 2 of which, that is, 24,000 years. They make the electric cycle complete. From 11,000 to 501 BC, when the autumnal equinox was on the first point of Aries, the sun began to move away from the point of its orbit nearest the grand center toward the point farthest from it, and accordingly the intellectual power of man began to diminish. During the 4,800 years which the sun took to pass through one of the Satra couples, or the 4/20th part of its orbit, the intellect of man lost altogether the power of grasping spiritual knowledge. During the 3,600 years following, which the sun took to pass through the descending Treta Yuga, the intellect gradually lost all power of grasping the knowledge of divine magnetism. During the 2,400 years next following, while the sun passed through the descending Dwapara Yuga, the human intellect lost its power of grasping the knowledge of electricities and their attributes. In 1,200 years more, the sun passed through the descending Kali Yuga and reached a point in its orbit which is farthest from the grand center. The autumnal equinox was on the first point of Libra. The intellectual power of man was so much diminished that it could no longer comprehend anything beyond the gross material creation. The period around AD 500 was thus the darkest part of Kali Yuga and of the whole cycle of 24,000 years. History indeed bears out the accuracy of these ancient calculations of the Indian rishis and records the widespread ignorance and suffering in all nations at that period. From AD 499 onward, the sun began to advance toward the grand center, and the intellect of man started gradually to develop. During the 1,100 years, 1,100 years of the ascending Kali Yuga, which brings us to AD 1599, the human intellect was so dense that it could not comprehend the electricities, the Sukshma Bhuta, the fine matters of creation. In the political world also, generally speaking, there was no peace in any kingdom. Subsequent to this period, when the 100-year transitional sandhi of Kali Yuga set in, to effect a union with the following Dwapara Yuga, men began to notice the existence of fine matters, Pacha and Macha, or the attributes of electricities, and political peace began to be established. About AD 1600, William Gilbert discovered magnetic forces and observed the presence of electricity in all material substances. In 1609, Kepler discovered important laws of astronomy, and Galileo produced a telescope. In 1621, Drebbel of Holland invented the microscope. About 1670, Newton discovered the law of gravitation. In 1700, Thomas Savery made use of a steam engine in raising water. 20 years later, Stephen Gray discovered the action of electricity on the human body. In the political world, people began to have respect for themselves, and civilization advanced in many ways. England united with Scotland and became a powerful kingdom. Napoleon Bonaparte introduced his new legal code into southern Europe. America won its independence, and many parts of Europe were peaceful. With the advance of science, the world began to be covered with railways and telegraphic wires. Excuse me. By the help of steam engines, electric machines, and many other instruments, fine matters were brought into practical use, although their nature was not clearly understood. In 1899, on completion of the period of 200 years of Dwapara Sandhi, the time of mutation, the true Dwapara Yuga of 2,000 years will commence and will give to mankind in general a thorough understanding of the electricities and their attributes. Such is the great influence of time which governs the universe. No man can overcome this influence except him who, blessed with pure love, the heavenly gift of nature, becomes divine. Being baptized in the sacred stream pranava, the holy Om vibration, he comprehends the kingdom of God. The position of the world in the Dwapara Sandhi era at present was AD 1894, when this was written, is not correctly shown in the Hindu almanacs. The astronomers and astrologers who calculate the almanacs have been guided by wrong annotations of certain Sanskrit scholars, such as Kulukabhata, of the Dark Age of Kali Yuga, and now maintain that the length of Kali Yuga is 432,000 years, of which 4,994 have, in AD 1894, passed away, leaving 427,006 years still remaining. A dark prospect, and fortunately, one not true. How so? We will continue in the next video.